overcome the challenging landscape that is thinking about automation in your fulfillment centers, warehouses, or your operations. Because sure enough, we understand the complexity of getting it right and how painful it can be getting it wrong. So Ocado as a business, we are an online grocery company. We started off with the mission of how do we change the way in which the world shops for groceries. So notoriously, we're all very familiar with going to brick and mortar stores. We recognize that there are customer service teams, lots of SKU range and lots of things that you can go and get access to. So that mission of moving to online only was certainly one that is a challenge. It poses challenges that we had to try and overcome. And part of that is things like the unit economics that are typically involved when we think about grocery fulfillment. So we need to be able to pick efficiently, store efficiently. We need to think about how we deliver those products to the customers. We need to make sure that they are fresh, they're not damaged. And we also need to make sure that the consumer remains excited about shopping on Ocado. So that's bringing in lots of brand new SKUs so we can keep them excited, we can bring them recipe boxes, and we can really make sure that they remain engaged. Now, with that came a lot of challenge. So for us, we wanted to be able to start off by putting in automation from day one. We knew that if we didn't do that, the unit economics would be too difficult to sustain, and we wanted to be able to prove to ourselves, to the UK, and to the market that online grocery could be a success. And we are now extremely proud that we've delivered to a series of partners around the world our full technology stacks, which I'll talk about briefly. But we are now delivering over 2 billion items being picked annually on our platform. And we are extremely excited about future growth opportunity. We recently made an announcement about another partner extending their offerings from Ocado. So we're really interested to see how we can continue to serve the market in the grocery fulfillment space. So I mentioned we went through a journey. So our mission was to change the way the world shops for groceries. And that provides an immense opportunity for us. So I think the market now for the end of 2025 is set to be at about $13.2 trillion, the grocery market. And that, of course, is a fantastic business if you can prove this model works and you can prove that it can be profitable, not just in London, where things are very expensive and property's expensive and labor's expensive, but also in marketplaces where perhaps labor is a bit more readily available and things are a little bit cheaper to deploy in and around urban areas for customers. So being local to the customer is really critical to make this model successful. And we believe, and we still believe, that that is a fantastic opportunity for our business, for our technical teams, for our operational teams, and for the teams that I represent here today. So for us, the main objective as well was to think about how can we deliver and develop the best automation strategy on the market from day one for this to work. And this has taken us a long time to perfect and get right, but we now are in a fantastic position. Ocado in the UK has over 1 million active customers. We occupy about 14% of the UK e-grocery market share, and we've just successfully been awarded for the last 12 months the fastest grocery retailer in the UK. So very impressive statistics, very impressive achievements, but we have not stopped and we continue to keep moving forward on some of those goals. But it was quite a challenge to get there. So in order to get there, we started off with automated operations, but we had to rely on other technology partners in the market. And I'm sure that many of you who work in warehouse and logistics, when we start to think about automation, there are lots of different suppliers out there. So we went through the same selection criterion process that a lot of you will be going through or have gone through or intend to go through. And it can be challenging to find the right partner who shares the same view, the same vision that you do, and understands what it means to deliver on your objectives. So we started off with automation that was quite complicated. It was difficult to integrate. We made an awful lot of mistakes and we changed from those mistakes. And we now lead with our OSRS platform. So hopefully many of you will have seen the YouTube videos of our wonderful robots driving around on top of the system and thinking, how does that actually work? Well, hopefully we can cover some of that for you today. And this is actually our latest facility in the UK. This is Luton. And you can see that not only are we now delivering our technology from where it started, we continue to innovate and we continue to push the efficiency of that platform as a whole. And for us, one of the biggest and most exciting things that we're now doing is fully automated item picking via the use of robotics. And Luton is now delivering near to 40% of all of its outbound volume is being delivered fully automated with item picking robots. So that's a truly impressive number, really helps us in those unit economics and make sure that Luton is an extremely profitable site that can serve our customers. So how did we get from the start to here? Well, we tried pretty much everything. We had conveyor technology. We actually started off, I'll show you a brief, very ugly photo in a moment from 2001. We started off with a monorail platform that essentially would drive around the warehouse. It would stop and wait and allow an operator to go and fill up the customer order basket. It was really inefficient. It did not work very well. And within the year, we decided that we had to be a business that failed fast. So we removed it. We went away from that strategy. We knew it was not going to give us the base that we needed to get to where we always envisaged that we would be in. So from there, we started to optimize everything around the product types. So we used to store pallets of goods, we used to have cartons, and we used to have totes. Now, each of those pose their own challenge because you have to be able to move those goods around the warehouse. You need to be able to unpack them. You need to be able to store them correctly. You need to think about the temperature regime that you're storing those goods. And we need to make sure that we can pick them and pack them so the customer is actually satisfied. Because one of the key drivers of being only online, you don't have somewhere that Mrs. Smith can come to the door and say, excuse me, this is damaged. You need to give me a replacement. There's actually a statistic that you have to get 4 consecutive orders correct in online grocery to retain the customer. If you do not deliver on that, the customer will move because the consumer expects excellence, they expect fresh produce without damage, and they want to make sure that they can have the order that they set for their family meal on the Friday night, and they don't no longer have any substitutions or damaged product. So it's really critical for us to make sure that we can maintain that customer experience as well. So as I mentioned, this is the manual picking zone that was supported by the monorail. I wasn't there at that time. As you heard, I've only been here a couple of years, but I've heard the challenges that this posed upon our teams, the operations. It wasn't really giving them the efficiency that they required, but it was also still supported by an extremely manual process. And this was how we took the customer order once completed. We needed to be able to buffer that order. We needed to be able to sequence it to make sure that we could drop the order in the right sequence to our customers. And whenever we have manual processes, that can be really challenging to ensure that it's done correctly and it's done efficiently and it's done in a cost-effective manner. So from there, we started to move into different technology types. So we started to deploy an awful lot of conveyance, and that conveyance would automatically move goods around the warehouse. We felt that that was an efficient way of delivering multiple picks from different temperature regimes via the use of conveyance. And I'm not sure if many of you are familiar with some of these technologies, but they're pretty rigid. They don't provide a lot of flexibility. And what it led to was Ocado having to think about the material flow. How can we alter the design of the conveyance without having to rely on the partner network that we currently had at the time? So over the years, we've now developed and ramped up to 2,000 engineers operating within Ocado. And their responsibility is to think about the software, think about the material flow, think about the temperature regimes and the things that will come along with moving goods in between those regimes. We have to start thinking about how we can sequence the product out to the customer. So we've developed a full front end all the way through to the final mile delivery platform that is all running from one software stack that's all been developed in-house by our engineering teams. We moved further into automation, and that was to deploy shuttle technology. So again, shuttles are a fantastic technology. There's lots of them out there in the marketplace. They work very reliably. However, they also pose different challenges about how can I sequence the product within my warehouse? How can I ensure that I'm sending the right bin to the right station without starving pickers at the back end? So we had to start thinking more about how do we get more from that platform. So Ocado took control of the shuttle as well. So our engineers not only run the conveyance, we also run the shuttle technology, and we still have some of those live in our operations today here in the UK. And then we decided, despite having a fantastic software stack, in order for us to achieve the efficiencies that we wanted to, we had to think about our own hardware. So we started to develop our own platform, and this is the platform that many will have hopefully seen, but we'll talk about a little bit today. And this system really for us allows us to think about storage density, availability of stock, high uptime because we remove all single points of failure, but it also provides us with a solid platform for us to think about how do we get more out of the system. So I mentioned a moment ago the robotic picking that we have. That is live, and it is all backwards compatible to this same platform. So we're pushing the innovation forward to make sure the software and the hardware can meet the demands of our customers, of our operations, and this platform for us has enabled us to really support that mission. But as you can see, that's just lots of robots running around on top of a grid, and Ocado is much more than that. So we are primarily, I believe, more of a software business. So when you think about Ocado, your experience is you go online, you shop online, but behind that sits a full supply chain ecosystem. We have to understand everything that's happening within the supply chain to support the end user's experience. So on Ocado.com, you may go on and edit your order. Now, when you edit your order, it's not as simple as just saying, well, we can change and pick the order. Actually, we have to start thinking about, is that now a heavy item that you've just added into your basket? And if it's a heavy item, we can't go and chuck that on top of the eggs. Otherwise, you're going to damage all of the products that we've previously picked. So we are taking millions and millions of alterations each and every day on orders. And we have to then resequence how we think about picking those products to ensure the customer experience remains high, we're not going to damage it, and therefore the customer does not have any returns they need to send back to the business. Then we have to think about how do we manage the supply chain. So we're leveraging an awful lot of artificial intelligence and machine learning, and we, again, are carrying out millions of different calculations to forecast what we actually require in our customer fulfillment centers based upon the orders that are in the pool. So on Ocado.com, you can order your products 21 days in advance and still enjoy the lowest substitutions in the UK. And that's all about how we're able to leverage that data, look at the customer order baskets, and ensure that we're ordering the right products to remain local to each customer at our sites. Then we have the software which is driving how we can optimize all of the picking. So we have the customer order. Now we need to think about how can I make sure the hardware that we've implemented, whether this be an Ocado platform, whether it be an alternative technology that we might have decided to integrate, we need to make sure that we know what's happening upstream to influence how efficient the warehouse can actually be. And this is all software that has been, again, developed by ourselves and can be fully used to integrate different technologies out in the marketplace. And last but not least, we have to think about how do we get the orders to the customer door. So we actually carry out, and this number sometimes still baffles me, but we carry out over 100 million calculations every second on Ocado.com. And that's so that we can recognize how can I be efficient in delivering these goods with the most efficient route and cost-effective route to our customer doors. So if you think about all of the individual types of properties we have just in London alone, we have to start to recognize, if I stick 40 customer orders on a van, am I putting the right customer orders on a van? Have I considered things like the traffic on the road? Have I considered that I've just been on holiday and I've put on a few pounds and therefore I can't run upstairs as quickly as I once could? All of these things we have to take into account to make sure that that final mile is efficient. In grocery alone, 20% of all the cost to fulfill a customer order is in the final mile. So this is a huge area that we're putting a lot of time, a lot of attention, and lots of our resource to ensure that we can remain ahead both of the competition, but actually continue to meet the ever-growing customer demands that we see. Now, the platform, all of that software is trying to make sure that we have an efficient system. So one of the first things that I saw when I joined Ocado is how we actually deliver order fulfillment. So traditionally, you might be considering goods-to-person technologies, and therefore you run an RFP process, you engage a consultant, you engage local integrators, and the primary goal that you've set them is, we have an issue with storage, and therefore I need to pick this amount of product from my system. So we go through a process, you identify, you found a good partner, but there are lots of processes that sit downstream that we have to consider. So, for example, when the order is picked, where do I convey it to, where do I buffer it to, and how do I sequence that correctly to either build up pallets or build up cages if you might be a retail environment. So our platform is taking all of that into consideration. So it's not just designed as a storage system. It's thinking about the end-to-end fulfillment process that has to be delivered in order for efficient fulfillment. So as you will have seen, we have the blue bins. The blue bins are the customer order tote. That could be everything from a rigid plastic tote, it could be a cardboard carton, but we are essentially inserting that into the platform, and then a customer order can start. All the open orders are then stored inside of the system instead of on racks or on conveyance, and then delivered firstly to a robotic pick cell. You can take it if you'd like to. To a robotic pick cell. And on the robotic pick cell, that will deliver and pick as many orders or many items as it can. And then once completed, the order is then taken to a manual picker, where the manual picking will then complete the remainder of the customer order. So we're thinking about taking the order tote, fulfilling the picks, and then once the order's completed, not putting it on the shop floor, taking up lots of footprint, lots of space, and introducing touch points that might be seen as unnecessary. Once it's stored inside of the grid, what we're able to then do is think about the sequence. So if we think about the final mile software, that is now communicating all the time with each customer fulfillment center to recognize what is the most efficient route and how late can I leave this order inside of the system before I have to dispatch it. So that then, once we know the route that we're going to do the fulfillment with, the robots on top of the grid that were used to originally just move bins to a pick station are now becoming your outbound sortation system. So they're doing the sorting and sequencing of all of the outbound order totes, all of the outbound order cartons. They're separated from the system, and then they're outloaded. The reason I want to just include this video is because when we start to think about operations and how we can drive efficiency, we should really begin to think about what is the total cost of ownership. So when I'm developing a site, or you're thinking about your supply chains, or you're trying to develop a warehouse, it's really about understanding every single step in your fulfillment process before you jump into a decision around what automation might be the best system for you. As I mentioned a moment ago, it can be quite overwhelming when you go out to the market. There are lots of fantastic businesses out there, but they of course have specialize in different areas of automation, and even then there'll be 5 businesses who sell very similar automation. So it's really about taking a step back and understanding what your data looks like, what your business looks like, and then when you go out to market for the different technologies, the different softwares, that you can thoroughly engage and take those data samples to those vendors who can then actually understand and present back to you. For every item you pick, it's going to cost X number of pence, but for every item you ship with this total fulfillment solution, it's going to cost you X. And that should be a metric that hopefully businesses are very aware of, but if not, I've certainly seen through customer engagement in the last 2 years, we principally are asked, can you just provide me something that gives me storage? And it's really about, what are you doing next? And until you know what you're doing next, I would always advise, just take a step back and give yourself an opportunity to actually think about those processes that are going to come downstream once the system's in place. As a business, we've now got 11 development centers around the world, so we're able to support a wide range of different customers, and we have these scattered across the world because, firstly, it's very hard to get talent these days. I'm sure you all recognize that as leaders of your own businesses, and therefore, if you just want to get the top 5% of everybody in London, it's not really going to happen. It's probably going to be very expensive. There's also understanding local markets and understanding local challenges. And if we truly want to be a global business, we need to make sure that we're listening to everybody around the market, we're taking feedback from local experts, and then making sure we can support their markets with the right team. Some of our commitments as Ocado, we typically make a couple of decisions when we think about problems in supply chain. Now, we have a couple of choices. We can either build something from ground up, we can buy something from another business, or if there is a business that is very closely aligned to our mission and our objectives, it's whether there might also be an opportunity to acquire that company. So over the last few years, we've made some truly wonderful investments into some fantastic businesses who can help us on our own business objectives. So more notably, and quite recently, we acquired Kindred. For those of you who don't know, Kindred were one of the market leaders in robotic picking technologies. They had a huge speciality in different gripper styles, otherwise known as end effectors. But also, they had a wonderful teleoperation system. So what that means is when a robot tries to pick something, we've all seen those videos when the robot just can't pick it up. They had a platform that enabled them to, on the fly, teach those robots how to pick an item that looks similar to that next time. So building up a huge database of both successful picks and non-successful picks. And that, for us, as we move into item picking, was a really important and aligned vision that we had. So we wanted to leverage some of their experiences. One of the core businesses, and it's actually a very reputable business, some of you may know, is a company called Six River Systems. So this business is a company that develop AMR technology, but it's system-directed AMR technology. So it's a platform that enables Ocado to think beyond what's totable. So we can't truly say that we're a partner that think about all of your processes, and then when you say, well, this doesn't fit in a tote, and we say, well, put it somewhere else then. So this was really about our own retail environment, so Ocado.com, where we had some challenges where perhaps things couldn't go inside of totes or in bins. But importantly, as we go out to the wider verticals, we have very large jackets, we might have skis, we might have big televisions. There are things in a supply chain that we have to make sure that we can give solutions to our customers. So those acquisitions have really enabled us to develop and support the overall mission that we have, which is continuing all of those lessons, both as technologists, but as operators of our own centers, and making sure that we can provide you a full offering that can support customers. We've made further commitment over the next 5 years, so we have committed $1.5 billion to continue our innovation journey. We are recognized as one of the leading technology businesses with lots of lessons that we've learned, but at the same time, we need to continue to keep pushing. We need to continue on this mission of making sure that grocery fulfillment can truly be as profitable as we see both here in the UK, and that we can take that and continue to scale it around the world for our partner network. The offerings that we have the Ocado storage and retrieval system. That is the platform we just spoke about briefly. We have what we now call our Ocado mobile robotics. So that is what was previously known as Six River Systems. And lastly, but by no means least, is our Ocadex family. So this is the robotics technology which we are rolling out across our own centers. I think in the last 5 months, we've delivered 460 million items picked via our item picking robotics. And we have just committed to rolling out a further 450 of these robotic arms across our own partner network. So it's an extremely mature technology. It's something that we are essentially using ourselves. So we don't go out to market and provide you these technologies if Ocado doesn't believe in them ourselves. So 40% of most of the groceries you may see from our sites are fulfilled now via robotic picking. And some of the key things that we have to think about is how do we stay ahead? How do we make sure that we can support our customers' challenges, especially now that we're going out into different verticals? Not everything is the same as grocery. You know, there are different challenges. Whether you're a fashion retailer, I'm working right now with quite a large one, and one of their challenges is how do they get close to their customers? How can they have a look and feel that, for example, in Scandinavia, they need a different SKU assortment than perhaps what they might do in central Germany. And for us, it's about working with customers to recognize, based on your data, based on the analysis, where, firstly, could you potentially position your warehouse? What kind of SKUs do your customers in those local areas typically purchase and buy? And then what automation is going to support that mission? So it's never about selecting the automation, it's actually about understanding your operation, what you're trying to achieve, and then we can start to think about the technology afterwards. So how do we future-proof our operations? And this is a few areas that I hopefully will get to continue to engage with you over the next couple of days. But some areas that we think that as leaders and as people who are running their own operations and supply chains, these are some areas that we've highlighted that we think could drive some great value, or at least have you think maybe slightly differently and just question maybe the approach, or question your partners, or question your future partners. So firstly, where you're located, do you have the most dense storage solutions? So when we used to have pallet technology, there is nothing more dense than storing products on a pallet. It's very inexpensive in terms of the density level that you'll get, but it's going to make your operation quite inefficient when it comes to picking items or picking cases. So does the density requirement meet your potential throughput? So it's not just about density, it's about being able to still run with efficiency. Also, whereabouts your operation's located. So I mentioned a moment ago the customer that I'm working with, they came to us and said, we have an objective, we're thinking about developing a new site for this mission. However, where should we locate that site? Where would be the right area? And famously, that is not something that an integrator or a solutions partner would typically look to help you with. So even if you're not working with or engaging with partners, there are opportunities for you to look at your previous sales data, your forecasts, to help support where you think in your network locating a new fully automated center or semi-automated center should be positioned to help your customers. And will that system or that site provide you with the flexibility? So if we think about the different technology types or even the different strategies you might look to deploy, is that going to be suitable for you in the next 3 to 5 years? If you just look back on perhaps even the change you've had in your own businesses in the last 3 to 5 years, when you're thinking of investing tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, pounds, euros into these kind of sites, it's about making sure that in 2-3 years' time it does not become a redundant site that we then look back and say we maybe should have taken more time or done things differently. So really important areas I would encourage most people to focus on, even before coming and speaking to people like Ocado or some of our fellow competitors in the industry. Once you've identified the site, one of the key things that we find very difficult, both in our operations and our partner sites, is labor availability. It's becoming more and more challenging to have people work in warehouse environments. It's becoming extremely competitive. So not just is the labor hard to find, the labor pools are quite finite. And we've all seen where typically somebody will raise their hourly wage by 50 pence an hour, and all of a sudden 20% of your workforce migrates to that site. So it's not just about deploying centers, it's making sure that you can continue to run them and maintain them with a high amount of efficiency. We'll always need people in warehouses. Some will say that we won't, and some say that robots can do everything humans can do, but better. I'm still yet to see that. Andy, don't tell that everybody today. But it's really about making sure that where we have labor, we can upskill them, we can bring in engineers, we can bring in technical operators, people who thoroughly enjoy working on technology, who understand technology and are excited about the vision and the mission that you have. So are you able to source and have the right staffing to drive that fulfillment operation? And then it comes down to, is the operation we're thinking of deploying too complex? So I mentioned we used to have different technologies integrated all around our sites, and they would potentially be from different partners. So it's also, where does the responsibility lie when something doesn't run or doesn't operate as intended to do so? I don't know for any of you who have automated solutions, they are fantastic until they break. Once they break, nobody likes them. So it's really about making sure that when you think about what technology to deploy, is it fault resilient? Will it support the operation? And what strategies can you look to deploy if an event should occur where something would happen to the automation? So I'd really encourage that thought process and challenging those vendors and partners to make sure the system can work with you, not just for today, but tomorrow in achieving some of those areas. And predictability and resilience, I mentioned about Ocado's data collation. So any decision that we typically make is always driven by simulation. So in the last 12 months, we successfully simulated 270 years worth of data. Now, I know that that number might just sound like a number, but that's 270 years of predictable and forecastable data running through our platform before we make any decision about our supply chain, where we locate sites, what technology we should deploy, or where we should spend our R&D budget. So every decision is a data-driven decision. Now, not every company will have that software availability or be able to analyze your data at the level that perhaps Ocado has developed over the last 25 years. But it doesn't mean that there aren't partners out there who can help you on that journey, who can help you make those decisions to ensure that it is a resilient platform. And in some markets, things such as security are really, really critical. There is an awful lot of wastage on businesses, especially when you think about pharmaceutical, where it's heavily regulated. there are areas we have to think about to put the right technologies in to meet those regulations and work with the local legislative bodies to make sure that whatever software and technology you put in meets those requirements. And that is something that a lot of people can do, but not everybody can do. So again, vendor selection and partner selection is really critical in your success as you move forward with these kind of areas. And you heard, with Ocado, we are all about unit economics. So we recognize what it means to be profitable. We have to maintain strong KPIs. We have to make sure that our system, via those simulations, is able to continue to serve us and continue to drive that profitability as a business. And I think KPI structures can be heavily overlooked in some organizations and very much, maybe even they're a little bit too much in some. So it's having the right KPIs to ensure that you're set up for your own business success. We just spoke a lot about the data. So how can we use that? And one of the key things that we're working on, again, with another customer at the moment is recognizing how thick their orders are. So this is a pharmaceutical customer, and they believe that their final mile solution is extremely efficient. When you look at their average bin fill, by taking their data and understanding the volumetrics that they've delivered to site, they're running at about 40% bin fill on van routes, which of course is not very efficient when you think that pharmaceutical distribution is also a very, very sensitive business when it comes to unit economics. So if we can increase those bin fills by taking that data, taking those volumetrics, think about what strategies we can deploy to either fill the bin, change the size of their bins, think about their routes that they're actually delivering on. There are lots of ways that we can use our data to optimize our solutions and our operations further. So I would definitely encourage, where possible, to get hold of your data and really make sure that that becomes a huge driving force in your decision-making process.
So I have two questions. One, does it mean that existing warehouse has to be completely redesigned to get the optimal benefit of your solution? That's A. B, what I have understood is if you have the existing shuttle system or traditional racking system, then your OMR solution would be the best one for robotic mobile picking. And if that, what would be the pick throughput of this solution versus the traditional one?
So the second question, throughput's always dependent upon your profile. So let's say, for example, one of our facilities, our pick stations can pick at around 990 bins per hour, so extremely fast, but it's all about understanding the utilization in your individual process. So if you've got a very complex labeling process because you are perhaps in an industry that is more regulated, you're not going to be picking at those kind of speeds. So it all comes from assessing your operation and making sure that we understand each and every process, and then we can give you those kind of metrics. I can share sort of the public numbers that we have around our own operations. We pick anywhere from around 600 units to 900 units on a manual pick face. So that can hopefully answer your second part of your question. In terms of any brownfield applications, so existing facilities, you're absolutely right. We have to think, how can we deploy technologies, whether it's Ocado or anybody else's technology. So usually you want to think about which partners can phase their system. So I don't know if you have shuttles or familiar with shuttles. If you want to put up a shuttle aisle next to an existing shuttle aisle, you usually have to have a 1.5 times drop radius. So this means when you're adding those and scaling those, it can be quite challenging. It's of course possible. But the right strategy is, how can we phase in technology? So can we remove certain parts of your racking, your fixtures, existing conveyance technology? And once we understand that, we can then develop what would be the right phase strategy. So we can work in brownfield and we can work in greenfield applications.
We've got a session, I think, this afternoon, but you mentioned other verticals. Are you doing sports apparel, footwear? Is that a vertical that you're going after?
Yeah, so our core focuses right now are fashion and apparel and pharmaceutical. And the reason we believe that is you probably saw what we call the captive fulfillment strategy. So that helps us in fashion, in particular in sportswear, when you think about omni-channel delivery. So if you're picking very small, thin orders for your e-com leg, but also perhaps doing wholesale and store picks, you need a strategy that can work for both. So we believe that our captive fulfillment strategy, by putting in cartons or your retail bins inside of the grid, picking into them, completing your order, will drive a lot of value in those verticals. And in particular as well with pharmaceutical, we actually signed our first non-grocery partner, which is McKesson. I think they're the 6th largest business in North America, around 900 billion turnover. And their mission was all about how can they increase the amount of units in a bin, how can they be more efficient, and we believe our technology, it's very closely aligned with those 2 verticals. Of course, there are lots of other verticals. We're working on case handling technologies. There's a lot that we're doing as a business to help support other verticals.
And last mile delivery, you do that as well?
So it's an area that we can work on with you, yes. So traditionally that would sit usually in one of our stacks, but we are working with our pharma clients to deliver that. And there are some other businesses who, of course I can't mention, who are looking at really complicated versions. So that is where you're actually shipping or sending out trunks, vans, and even smaller types of vehicle. So we can support all of those in your supply chain process.
Right, and you'd fund capital as well. That would be an investment you can support?
It's something we'd have to look at with the business, but we can go into those details for sure.
Yeah.